Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Sherman and this is Sherman Spectrum, where we get to talk about LGBTQ cinema all around the world. And the film that I'm going to be talking about today is Closet Monster. Now, Closet Monster is a film that I have done a video about in the beginning of the year, but got taken down, so I decided to do a new re-upload about the film. Now, the film is written and directed by Stephen Dunn, who most of you guys might know, who did the re-version of Queer as Folk, the 2022 version, and he sort of did a reimagined version of how it should be, since it has a lot more representation. It's more inclusive compared to the 2000s version, which I still hold very dear to my heart, but I would definitely check out both versions of the series, and it's really good. Anyway, so Closet Monster, I think for a lot of LGBTQ creators, is sort of like a rite of passage. I mean, at least for me it is. I mean, there are plenty of other LGBTQ films that are older and that definitely surpass this film, but somehow this film has sort of cemented itself in my subconscious as something I definitely want to talk about, because it really does deal with a lot of issues, especially internalized homophobia and the different aspects of internalized homophobia that affect a lot of people. Now, the film sort of opens with two versions of our main character, Oscar Madley, who is played by Connor Jessup. Now, for those of you who don't know who Connor Jessup is, he does have a TV series on Netflix in Lock and Key, and he also was in an older series back in 2012. Back in 2013, I think it was called Falling Skies. So he's a phenomenal actor, and his role in this film is just tremendous. Now, the film starts with an 8-year-old Oscar who really seems to be having a really great relationship with his parents, including his father, who later in the film turns out to be one of the most biggest D-bags that you can imagine, but I'll talk about him later. Now, basically, Oscar sort of witnesses or is going through what most kids go through, watching their parents go through a divorce, and of course it can be quite traumatic and confusing as he doesn't really know what's happening. And it's through this experience that he sort of befriends his pet hamster, who eventually ends up having these full-on live conversations with. And the the hamster is known as Buffy. You know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So probably a name given by Stephen Dunn to sort of represent how Buffy is sort of slaying the monsters in his closet. Get it? Closet monster. And the hamster is sort of Oscar's coping mechanism as a way of us as a viewer to get into his subconscious. So of course we know that the hamster isn't really talking to him, but the hamster is sort of giving us an inner dialogue of what is happening, or how at least Oscar is feeling and expressing himself. Now, before I really get into it, there are fewer details that I need to quickly mention as how this becomes a part of the plot. So the first part is, yes, like I mentioned, his parents are getting a divorce. The second part is he witnesses a hate crime at the age of 8, which is quite traumatic. And what sort of happens is a bunch of kids attack another queer kid, or a kid who they assume to be gay, and sort of ends up getting brutally attacked and sodomized with a metal pole. Now, this metal pole sort of becomes quite symbolic throughout the film, as this is his traumatic experience. And every time Oscar sort of tries to engage or feel anything remotely related to homosexuality, he sort of feels the metal pole within his own abdomen as if the attack is happening to him. In other words, do not engage in anything gay or this will happen to you. And his environment, or at least his internal and external environment when he is a kid, isn't really helpful or very positive towards the LGBTQ community, because when the kid is attacked, he does happen to ask his father why was a metal rod shoved up his backside, and his father responds by saying, well, because, you know, he's gay, instead of saying, you know, that the world is different and that people are homophobic or there's people who cannot understand other different people. He sort of plants the seed in Oscar's head that being gay means being bad, and if you're gay, bad things are going to happen to you, and you've got to keep your hair short because it portrays a more masculine bravado energy to the world. So this is basically what Oscar carries with him throughout his life. And because of his traumatic experience, now Oscar at age 18 sort of has this really weird fixation with body horror. And it's basically just his way of expressing himself through art. So he is planning on going through an art institute or an artist's university in New York. And to our second main protagonist, who happens to be played by Alyosha Schneider, who plays Wilder. Now, Wilder is the dreamy boy next door who happens to be a new co-worker who ends up working with Oscar throughout the summer. So it's clearly obvious to us as a viewer that he has feelings for Wilder, or is at least attracted to Wilder. But every time he sort of thinks about Wilder or in a certain way, he sort of gets this numbing pain in his abdomen. Of course, that is the psychological effect of the trauma that affects Wilder. We also get to meet his friend Gemma, who is actually quite sweet and innocent, who might have a little crush on him, or is also, as a friend, really sort of seeing that Oscar is going through something, and she also really doesn't know how to approach him because, you know, I'm not sure if she's aware of what he witnessed as an 8-year-old boy, but she definitely can see that there's something changing within him and he's becoming a different person, and she doesn't really know how to approach him, but she does know that he is gay. Now, like I mentioned, Oscar's father, Peter, played by Aaron Abrams, is one of the most hated but also loved characters, in my opinion, in the film. Because yes, his father may be homophobic, a little possessive, a little childish, and doesn't really know how to handle or understand Oscar. I mean, at least this is what I feel from watching the film. You know, he doesn't really know how to deal with Oscar, and he sort of is using him as a weapon against Oscar's mom every time there's a little fight. So Oscar's kind of in the middle between their parents' divorce, and is always, and still kind of is since he was a kid. And this sort of resents this huge resentment towards Oscar and his father, as they don't really have the best relationship. Some might even say it's a little toxic. So Oscar's father happens to be a little bit on the unsure side if whether his son might be gay or not, but when he does actually find out that Oscar is gay or might be gay, he sort of has this really old school negative approach to homosexuality, because I do think from a viewer's point, from what we can see in the film, especially in the beginning of the film, he really is trying to understand his son, he really is trying to be a father, he even helps him with his projects as well. But I feel like when it comes to Oscar being gay, his father really doesn't know what to do. He also seems to be quite possessive, and he really says really nasty things to Oscar, as if Oscar doesn't really know what to do. Now, throughout all of this process, he sort of deals with it through Buffy, the hamster. Now, I want to talk about Wilder for a second. So a lot of people have been wondering, is Wilder actually gay? Is he straight? He's sort of, I think for the plot for the film, he's sort of like the catalyst, where he sort of shows Oscar how to be gay, or at least accept a part of himself. You know, the rest of that has to come from Oscar, but he finally gives Oscar his first kiss. He tells him that it's cool to like guys, and that there's really nothing wrong with being gay. So he's sort of helping him. He's not really there to become Oscar's boyfriend or to end up living happily ever after. He's just there as a transition period. The real issue with Oscar happens to be what happened to him as a kid, the homophobia attack, and of course his father and the environment around his father that sort of just doesn't make it okay. You know, instead of his father, as I mentioned, comforting him and letting him know that the world is evil and that there are really, really bad people in the world, he sort of makes it feel that it's their own fault for being different, so therefore this is what's going to happen to you. He does eventually end up killing the hamster. It sort of sends Oscar on a whole spiral. A lot of things happen between Oscar and his mom. We also get to see that his relationship with his mother and her new family is also very toxic. He doesn't really, or hasn't really accepted, you know, his mom's new lifestyle with having a new husband and having new kids. But she does kind of make it clear to Oscar at some point in the film that she couldn't really stay with Oscar's dad because he is generally toxic, and if she stayed there she would have died or she would have left. And she felt really sorry for leaving, but as she has made it clear, she never really left Oscar. She just left the relationship. And eventually there's a whole little drama that happens. Oscar finally comes to terms with what his actual trauma is, and that it's kind of his father or his father's homophobia that only escalates how he's feeling. And once he's finally able to accept that, he's finally able to stand up to his father and sort of end up locking his father in his own house, for example. Okay, now would I recommend this film to everyone or to a lot of people? Number one, no. It is super triggering to anyone who's experienced any sort of internalized homophobia, whether it's physical violence or emotional abuse or just any sort of way that does not allow you to accept who you are. This film definitely shows all of that, and this was definitely something that Stephen Dunn, the director, wanted to show in the film, that there are different forms of internalized homophobia and attack, and how it can really affect your life as a kid. And growing up and facing your demons or your closet monster is what would allow you to be more free. The film does do a really good job of blending fantasy with reality. So like I mentioned, it's not for everybody. You know, while watching the film for the first time, I was generally confused if what I was actually seeing on screen was real, you know, and that's sort of this whole portrayal that Oscar isn't a a reliable narrator, because we're not sure if what we're seeing is real. You know, the whole issue with him and Buffy, the whole scenario with him and his dad. Is his dad really as bad as he seems, or is his dad actually just trying to figure him out? It's so confusing, but it's so captivating, and I definitely think that anyone who really enjoys decent cinematography or weird psychedelic elements will find this film amazing. Anyway, my name is Sherman. This is Sherman Spectrum. Please remember to give this video a like, or give it or subscribe, or give it a comment, or basically tell me what are your thoughts about Closet Monster. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.